Lydia Harden was standing in the dirt with her hands tied behind her back and the noon sun burning her skin, and the first thing Elias Crow saw was the purple bruise on her cheek and the way her torn shirt barely clung to her shoulders. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she just swayed there in the heat like someone halfway between living and giving up. Elias had ridden in from his ranch to talk to Sheriff Roy Harden about a missing steer. He expected a short conversation and maybe a handshake. Instead, he found the sheriff's young wife tied to a porch post like she was nothing more than a troublemaking prisoner. Her lips were cracked, her knees were scraped raw, the rope around her wrists had cut deep enough to bleed. Elias felt his stomach twist. He swung off his horse in one quick motion. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Lydia lifted her head, slow and heavy, and he saw the kind of pain that makes a man forget his own breath. He stepped closer. "Who did this to you?" Her voice rasped out. "My husband did. The sheriff. Roy left me here all morning. He said I deserved it." The words hit Elias harder than any fist. He cut the rope from her wrist. She collapsed forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "Easy now. You are all right. I got you." She winced when he lifted her. Every inch of her looked sore or bruised. Her shirt was torn in 3 places. Dirt clung to her skin like it had been ground into her. Inside the house, he set her gently in a chair. She kept her eyes down. Ashamed of injuries she didn't cause, he poured a cup of water. "Drink slow." She nodded. The cup rattled in her hands. He reached for a cloth and wiped the dust from her arms. Her skin flinched at the touch, not because of him, but because someone else had touched her far too hard for far too long. When she finally met his eyes, he saw something that shook him to his core. Not fear, not shame, something worse. A quiet acceptance that this was the life she was expected to endure. Elias felt anger rising in his chest, steady and hot. This was the sheriff's doing. The man sworn to protect others had beaten his own wife and left her tied like an animal. Elias took a breath, trying to steady the fire in his voice. "Lydia, what in God's name happened here?" And what she whispered next would change everything. But the real question is this: when the sheriff returns and the truth finally comes out, will Elias be the man who walks away or the man who stands between her and the monster she married? Lydia sat there in the wooden chair with her wrists free at last, but her shoulders still curled in like she expected another hit to come from somewhere. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Only the old clock on the wall ticked like it was counting down to something ugly. Elias could feel his pulse in his neck. He had not seen a woman hurt this bad since the old frontier wars, and even then, most had someone to stand up for them. Lydia looked like she had never had anybody in her corner. He dipped the cloth in cool water again. "This is going to sting a little." She nodded. "Go ahead." "I'm used to worse." Those words cut deeper than any wound on her skin. Used to worse. Used to it. As he cleaned the dried blood near her shoulder, she spoke again, soft and shaky. "Elias, I need to tell you something." He pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "All right, I am listening." She took a long breath, trying to hold herself together. "Roy says I cannot give him a child. He says that makes me worthless. He says that makes everything my fault." Elias frowned. "That is a cruel thing to tell a woman." She shook her head. "It is also a lie." Her voice cracked. "I saw a letter from the doctor in Wichita, a letter Roy hid. The truth is that I can have a child. He cannot. He has known it for years." Elias felt the room tilt for a second. "So he blamed you?" "Yes. He beat me for it. He tied me up for it. He tried to break me for it." She wiped her cheek. "Then he went into town to brag about chasing bandits so folks would think he is some kind of hero." Elias leaned back and ran a tired hand through his beard. His jaw tightened as the truth sank in. Roy had built his reputation on the bodies of others, and his own wife carried the proof of it across her skin. Lydia looked at him with an expression he didn't understand at first. It was not fear anymore. It was not shame either. It was something closer to hope. "Elias, She hesitated. There is one thing I want, one thing I need if I'm going to survive this life. He leaned closer. Tell me. Her breath trembled. I want a child. Then her eyes lifted and locked on his. And I want that child from you. For a moment the world held still, like the wind outside forgot how to move. Elias felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was asking. He opened his mouth to speak, but Lydia whispered first. Please, say something. But let me ask you this. If you were in Elias' shoes right now, standing in front of a wounded young woman begging you for a child, could you walk away from that temptation? Elias didn't have time to answer her, not even a breath, because that was the exact moment a horse snorted hard outside and boots hit the porch boards with the kind of heavy confidence only one man in Dodge City carried. Lydia froze. Her fingers squeezed the arms of the chair. He is back. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Elias felt something shift in his gut. That old instinct he used to feel back when he worked cattle drives through Apache country. That quiet warning that trouble was about to walk straight toward him. The front door slammed open. Sheriff Roy Hardin filled the doorway with a bottle in one hand and anger in the other. His shirt was half undone, dust on his boots, and a grin on his face that died the second he saw Elias standing beside his wife. Well now, look at this. My wife sitting all nice and cozy, and a rancher built like an ox standing in my kitchen. Roy stared at Lydia, his smile twisting. I leave you alone for a few hours and you find yourself a caretaker. Is that it? Lydia's breath shook. Roy, please, let me explain. Explain what? Roy took 2 steps inside. Explain why you look like someone cleaned you up. Or why this man is touching things in my house. Elias stepped forward, calm but firm. She was hurt. She needed help. Roy barked a laugh. She needed discipline. That is what she needed. A woman ought to know her place. He grabbed Lydia by the arm. She cried out. Elias grabbed Roy's wrist, fast as lightning for a man pushing 50. Let her go. Roy jerked his hand back, shocked that anyone dared to touch him. You have lost your damn mind, Crow. I am the law here. Elias met his stare without blinking. And the law doesn't beat a woman half to death. Roy's face darkened. She told you lies. She always tells lies, and she cannot give me a child. She's nothing but trouble. Lydia finally snapped. You know the truth. I saw the letter. The doctor said you cannot have children. Not me. You. Roy went pale, then red, then pale again. He reached for his revolver. Elias moved first. He slapped the gun away and shoved Roy back so hard the sheriff crashed into the table. Chairs clattered. The bottle shattered. Lydia flinched like a gun had gone off. Roy pushed himself up, face burning with humiliation. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Crow. Elias stood his ground. Maybe so, but I will not stand by and let you break her again. Roy wiped blood from his lip and smiled a cold smile. Then we will settle this in front of the whole town. Let them see who the liar is. Let them see who is worth believing. And here's the part you have to wonder about. If the whole town gathers to hear the truth, will they believe the sheriff they fear or the rancher they trust? The whole town gathered before noon. Dodge City always loved a little drama, especially when it involved the sheriff. Folks lined up outside the old meeting hall, whispering like chickens before a storm. Some leaned on hitching posts. Some held their hats against the heat. Nobody knew exactly what happened, but everyone smelled trouble. Roy Hardin marched in first with his chest puffed out and his pride stitched back together with pure arrogance. He pointed at Elias and shouted loud enough for half Kansas to hear. This man laid hands on me in my own home. He tried to turn my wife against me. A few people nodded because that was easier than thinking. Elias walked in slower, steady like a man who had nothing left to lose but his honor. Lydia stayed behind him with her sleeves pulled up just enough to show the bruises she could not hide anymore. The whole room went quiet when they saw her face. Even the folks who liked Roy shifted uncomfortably. Roy stepped forward. Tell them what you told him, Lydia. Tell them you cannot give me a child. Lydia kept her hands clasped tight. I will tell them the truth. Roy rolled his eyes. There you go. Starting with lies already. Lydia reached into her pocket with a shaky breath. She held up a folded paper. "This is the letter from the doctor in Wichita. I saw it with my own eyes. Roy is the one who cannot have children. Not me." The crowd rippled. Some gasped. Some muttered under their breath. Roy lunged for the paper, furious. "You little traitor." Before he could touch her, Elias stepped between them like a wall of iron. "If you want to swing at someone, swing at me," Roy snarled. "Gladly." He reached for his revolver. What happened next was fast enough to make the whole room jump. Roy barely cleared the holster when Elias slapped his hand aside and drew first. A single shot cracked through the air. The bullet tore through Roy's firing hand and sent his gun spinning across the floor. Folks screamed. A few stumbled back. Roy dropped to his knees, clutching his hand and cursing through clenched teeth. "You ruined me, Crow." Elias lowered his gun. "No, you ruined yourself." The room fell silent in a way that made the hair stand up on the back of every neck. A few old ranchers in the crowd gave slow nods, the kind men give when justice finally catches up to someone. The deputy hesitated, glancing from Roy to the crowd, unsure if he should even move. Only after a long breath did he step forward, shaky as a greenhorn, and lay a hand on Roy's vest. He didn't rip the badge off. He eased it free, like he was afraid it might burn him. That was the moment everyone knew Roy Hardin's power was gone. Old man Whitaker, the banker who led the town council, spat on the floor and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear it. "It is done, Roy. That badge is not yours anymore. Anyone who wants to argue can step up and say it to my face." Finished in front of everyone, stripped of power he never deserved. Lydia watched with a mix of fear, relief, and something close to freedom. Elias helped her stand, his hand steady under hers. The room whispered again, but this time the sound felt different. Warmer. Almost supportive. But here's the question you have to think about. Now that Roy Hardin is fallen, what will happen when Lydia and Elias try to build a life that Roy can no longer control? Roy Hardin was done as sheriff before the sun even touched the tops of the cottonwoods. By evening, Dodge City had grown strangely quiet, like the whole town was still trying to digest what it witnessed. A man who walked around bigger than the law had been brought down by the truth, and a woman who had spent years with her head lowered finally stood tall in front of everyone. Folks said they sometimes saw Roy standing near the far fence line at dusk, just a shadow leaning on a post. Once, Elias spotted a figure slipping behind the cottonwoods near the creek, but when he called out, the man disappeared. Roy showed up drunk at the saloon more than once, mumbling about second chances nobody planned to give him. But every time he looked toward the ranch, he turned away. Even men like Roy know when a fight is already lost. Elias walked Lydia out of the hall, one steady hand on her back. The air smelled like dust and warm summer wheat. Lydia kept glancing around, not afraid anymore, but unsure of where a life begins when the old one dies in front of a crowd. What happens now? Her voice still shook, even though she tried to hide it. Elias watched the horizon a long moment. "Now you breathe free. And you don't do it alone." When she moved to Elias Ranch a few weeks later, the town pretended not to stare, but everyone did. A young woman and a rancher almost twice her age made for good gossip. Folks peeked from their windows when Lydia fetched water. They whispered over their fences. "Reckon he took her in too fast. No woman heals that quick. And did you see the way he looks at her?" Some believed Elias had only defended her out of honor. Others believed the two had been tangled up long before Roy fell. Truth never travels faster than a rumor, especially not in a small town. But inside that little cabin, nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt wrong. Elias gave Lydia space to grow into herself again. He taught her how to mend tack. She planted flowers by the front step. Their laughter came softly at first, almost embarrassed to be heard, then warmer with each passing week. By spring, they stood before Pastor Russell in the small white church at the edge of town. Some neighbors attended, out of kindness. Some came to judge quietly from the back pew. A few whispered that it was too soon. A few nodded like they always knew it would end this way. Lydia tightened her grip on Elias' hand, nervous under all those eyes. He leaned close and whispered, "Let folks talk. They don't know the miles you walked to get here." She smiled through tears. It was nearly 3 years after their wedding when Lydia took Elias' hand one quiet evening by the kitchen table. Her voice was soft, almost afraid of its own hope. "Elias, I think I am with child." For a long moment he just stood there, eyes shining, like a man who had been given back more than he ever lost. When her belly finally began to show, the gossip rose again. "I told you something was going on before the sheriff fell." Others shook their heads. "No, that baby looks like Elias, and Lydia looks happy for the first time in years." One older neighbor joked about how long it took, and Elias just smiled and said, "The Lord made us wait a little longer than folks think he did." The truth softened even the hardest tongues. When the baby finally arrived, strong and loud, some neighbors brought pies, some brought blanket. A few still stood at their fences, watching quietly, undecided whether to believe in the happiness they were seeing. And maybe that is the beauty of it. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Healing doesn't have to be quiet to be real. And love doesn't need the town's approval to grow strong. So let me ask you this. If you had walked through the fire like they did, would you let whispers stop you, or would you build the life that feels right in your own bones? If this final chapter touched you, give the video a like so more folks can find it.